The air on the tarmac was sharp, smelling of jet fuel and money. Before Dr. Evelyn Reed stood a magnificent $65 million Gulfstream G650, its silver fuselage gleaming under the New Jersey sun. This jet was more than a machine. It was a symbol of everything she had built. Every late night, every barrier she had shattered. But one man stood between her and her own aircraft. A pilot, his arms crossed, his expression a wall of cold condescension. He saw a black woman and made an assumption. He had no idea he was about to make the biggest mistake of his career, a mistake that would unravel a conspiracy and bring a world of karma crashing down upon him. This isn't just a story about prejudice. It's about what happens when someone underestimates the wrong woman. The late September air whipped across the tarmac at Teterboro Airport, carrying with it the low whine of distant engines. It was a symphony of power and privilege, a place where the world's elite bypassed the indignities of commercial travel. For Dr. Evelyn Reed, it was simply a tool of the trade. At 42, she was the founder and CEO of Aura Innovate, a company at the vanguard of AI-driven sustainable agriculture. Her technology was poised to revolutionize food production, and a critical climate summit in Geneva, Switzerland, awaited her. The future of a multi-billion-dollar partnership depended on her being there. Her chariot for this journey was a Gulfstream G650ER, registration N92AR. AR for Aura. She'd bought it outright 6 months ago, a decision born of necessity, not vanity. Her schedule was a brutal, globe-spanning beast, and the jet was the only way to tame it. As her black Lincoln Navigator glided to a stop beside the sleek aircraft, Evelyn felt the familiar hum of anticipation. She smoothed down her tailored navy blue pantsuit, her mind already cycling through the talking points for her opening address in Geneva. Her assistant, a sharp young man named Liam, opened her door. "Everything is ready, Dr. Reed," Liam said, handing her a leather portfolio. "The flight plan is filed. We should be wheels up in 20 minutes. "Excellent, Liam, thank you." She strode towards the air stairs, her heels clicking with purpose on the asphalt. At the top of the stairs stood the flight attendant, a woman with a warm, welcoming smile. But at the bottom, blocking the way, was the pilot. He was a man in his late 50s, with silver gray hair cropped short in a military style. His uniform was crisp, his posture rigid. A name tag on his chest read, Captain Frank Miller. His eyes, a pale, washed-out blue, raked over Evelyn, and his expression was not one of welcome, but of impassive skepticism. "Good afternoon, Captain," Evelyn said, offering a professional smile. "I'm Dr. Reed, ready for a smooth flight to Geneva." Captain Miller did not return the smile. He crossed his arms, his body a physical barrier. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your identification and charter confirmation." Evelyn's smile tightened just a fraction. This was unusual. Typically, the FBO, fixed base operator, staff at the terminal, handled all identification checks. Once you were on the tarmac, you were cleared. "Of course," she said, her voice even. She opened her portfolio and produced her passport. Liam, sensing the strange friction, stepped forward. "Captain, Dr. Reed is the principal," Liam stated politely. All her credentials were cleared at the FBO. Miller took the passport from Evelyn, his eyes flicking from the photo to her face and back again. He held it a second too long, as if searching for a flaw in the forgery. "The charter confirmation, please," he repeated, his tone flat. "There is no charter confirmation, Captain," Evelyn said, her patience beginning to thin. "This is not a chartered flight." "All passengers must be on the manifest provided by the charter company," Miller said, his voice taking on a patronizing, by-the-book cadence. "I have a manifest here. It lists one principal passenger, a Dr. E. Reed. I need to verify that it's you via the charter service that booked this flight." A cold knot began to form in Evelyn's stomach. This wasn't protocol. This was something else. "Captain Miller," she said, her voice dropping a degree, losing its superficial warmth. "Let me be very clear. I am Dr. E. Reed, Stratus Jet Management. The company that staffs my flight crew should have made that clear to you. I am the owner of this aircraft. Now, if you'll please step aside, I have a summit to attend." The captain's lips thinned into a smirk, a fleeting but unmistakable expression of disbelief. It was a look Evelyn had seen 1,000 times in her life. in boardrooms, at investor meetings, from professors in college. It was the look that said, "You don't belong here." "With all due respect, ma'am," he said, drawing out the word, "I've been flying for 30 years. I've flown rock stars, oil tycoons, and royalty. People who own a Gulfstream G650 don't typically—" He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. "Don't typically look like you." Liam's face flushed with anger. "Captain, that is completely out of line." Evelyn held up a hand, silencing him. She would handle this. She had always handled this. Showing anger would only make her seem emotional or difficult. The double standards were exhausting, but she knew how to navigate them. "They don't typically what, Captain?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Miller seemed to realize he'd gone too far. He recalibrated, falling back on the shield of procedure. "They don't typically travel without an entourage or have their ownership details, so unclear. My duty is to the safety and security of this aircraft. Until I can verify your identity and authorization to board with the management company, you will not be boarding." He was stonewalling her. On her own plane? The flight attendant at the top of the stairs looked mortified. Her co-pilot, a younger man named Alex Vance, had emerged from the cockpit and was watching with a deeply uncomfortable expression. The wind felt colder now. The whine of the engines sounded like a taunt. Every second they stood here, her meticulously planned schedule was crumbling. The pre-summit dinner with the Swedish energy minister was slipping away. "Captain," Evelyn said, her voice like ice, "you are making a serious professional mistake." "I'm following security protocols," he shot back, his jaw set. "My word is final on this tarmac." Evelyn held his gaze. The arrogance in his eyes was absolute. He was a man who had never been seriously challenged, a king in his small kingdom of the cockpit. He believed he was in complete control. He had no idea of the storm he had just unleashed. "Very well, Captain," she said, her calm demeanor unsettling him more than any shouting match could. She turned to Liam. "Liam, please get Robert Davies on the phone for me." Captain Miller's expression flickered. Robert Davies was the CEO of Stratusjet Management. "And while you're at it," Evelyn continued, her eyes still locked on the pilot, "please open my briefcase, the one with the red folder. I believe it's time to show the captain the deed to his house." The tension on the tarmac thickened into a palpable, suffocating blanket. The co-pilot, Alex Vance, shifted his weight, his discomfort radiating from across the few yards that separated him from the escalating confrontation. He'd only been flying with Captain Miller for 2 months, but he'd quickly learned that Frank's old-school ways often bled into stubborn arrogance. This, however, was a new and horrifying level. Liam, his hands trembling slightly with controlled rage, swiftly unlatched Evelyn's sleek aluminum briefcase. He pulled out a red folder marked with the simple label, G650ER, N9912AR. He handed it to Evelyn, his eyes flashing a message of support. Evelyn took the folder. She didn't open it immediately. Instead, she let the moment stretch, forcing Captain Miller to stand there, stewing in the consequences of his challenge. His confident posture had begun to falter. The mention of Robert Davies' name had clearly landed a blow. Calling the CEO was like a soldier going over a general's head directly to the Joint Chiefs. It simply wasn't done. "Captain Miller," Evelyn said, her tone that of a lecturer addressing a particularly slow student. "This aircraft, serial number 64588, was purchased by the Aura Innovation Corporation on March 14th of this year from Gulfstream Aerospace in Savannah. The transaction was for $66,200,000. I know the exact figure because I personally signed the wire transfer authorization. My company owns it, therefore I own it." She opened the folder. The first document on top was the FAA Certificate of Registration. She held it out. Her name, Dr. Evelyn Reed, representing Aura Innovation Corp., was clearly printed under registrant. Miller's eyes darted to the paper. He didn't take it. He just stared, his face slowly losing its color. The smirk was long gone, replaced by a rigid mask of disbelief. He was a man whose entire worldview was being dismantled on a windy patch of asphalt. Women like her didn't own planes like this. It was a fundamental rule in the universe he inhabited. "This," he started, his voice a hoarse whisper. This could be falsified. It was a pathetic, desperate last stand. Falsified? Evelyn asked, a single, incredulous laugh escaping her lips. It was a sharp, bitter sound. Captain, do you have any idea how insane you sound? You think I commissioned a multi-million-dollar forgery just for the thrill of trying to board a random Gulfstream at Teterboro? She didn't wait for an answer. She flipped to the next page. It was a copy of the original bill of sale, a thick document bearing the official seal of Gulfstream Aerospace. She then flipped again to the multi-page insurance declaration from a Lloyd's of London syndicate, listing every conceivable detail of the aircraft and its designated principal operator, Dr. Evelyn Reed. Here is the bill of sale. Here is the insurance binder, she said, her voice a relentless, calm staccato. And here, she pulled out the final document, is my operating agreement with your employer, Stratus Jet Management. It specifies that I have final approval on the flight crew for my aircraft, a fact that Mr. Davies will be very interested to discuss with you. The co-pilot, Alex, finally broke his silence. He walked down the air stairs, his expression apologetic. Frank, he said, his voice low but firm. Frank, stop. Just stop. Miller shot him a venomous look, a silent command to stay out of it. But the dam of his authority had been breached. The FBO manager, Marcus Thorne, was now power-walking across the tarmac toward them, his phone pressed to his ear. He looked panicked. The call from Liam had clearly set off a 5-alarm fire at the executive level. Dr. Reed, Captain Miller, Marcus called out, his voice strained. There seems to be a terrible misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Marcus, Evelyn corrected him coolly. Your FBO cleared me, and Captain Miller decided to overrule that clearance based on his own personal, and I suspect discriminatory criteria. Marcus paled. The word discriminatory was a death knell in the service industry, especially one catering to the ultra-wealthy. Captain Miller, Marcus said, turning to the pilot, his tone now pleading. I just got off the phone with Stratus Jet. They confirmed Dr. Reed is the owner. You need to let her board, immediately. The public confirmation, the direct command from a third party, was the final nail in the coffin of Miller's defiance. He looked at the papers in Evelyn's hand. He looked at the face of his horrified co-pilot. He looked at the panicked FBO manager. And then he looked at Evelyn. And for the first time, the wall of his arrogance crumbled, revealing the petty, insecure man behind it. What flickered in his eyes was not remorse. It was fear. The primal fear of a man who has just realized he has destroyed his own career. He stepped aside. His body, which had been a rigid, defiant obstacle, now seemed to sag, to shrink in his crisp uniform. He said nothing. He couldn't. Evelyn gave him one last, long look. She didn't say, I told you so. She didn't need to. The victory was absolute, but it tasted like ash. This should never have happened. She should be thinking about her presentation, about the future of sustainable farming, not fighting for the right to step onto her own property. Without another word, she ascended the stairs. The flight attendant, her face a mask of professional contrition, murmured, Welcome aboard, Dr. Reed. My deepest apologies for the delay. Evelyn simply nodded, stepping into the cool, quiet luxury of the cabin. Liam followed her, taking her briefcase. The door hissed shut, sealing them off from the drama on the tarmac. Inside the cabin was a sanctuary of cream leather and polished dark wood. It was designed for focus and tranquility, but today the tranquility was shattered. Evelyn sank into one of the plush seats, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving a profound weariness in its place. She had won the battle, but as she gazed out the circular window at the shrinking figures of Miller and the others below, a disturbing thought began to form in her mind. Miller's prejudice was ugly and obvious, but was it just that? Or was his stubbornness, his willingness to risk his job to stop her, rooted in something more than simple bigotry? The delay had been significant, nearly 45 minutes. In her world, 45 minutes could be the difference between securing a deal and losing it. Liam, she said, her voice low, I want you to do something for me, discreetly. Find out everything you can about Captain Frank Miller, his service record, his financials, his recent associates, everything. Liam looked at her, his expression grim. He understood immediately. You think this was more than just, what does it look like? I don't know, Evelyn admitted, watching as the jet finally began its slow taxi toward the runway. But his resistance felt desperate, almost as if he had a reason to keep me on the ground. Let's find out if he does. The powerful Rolls-Royce engine spooled up, pressing her back into her seat as the G650 rocketed down the runway. She was finally on her way to Geneva, but the confrontation on the tarmac had left a poisonous residue. She had a sinking feeling that the nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. The climb to cruising altitude was steep and swift. The Gulf Stream knifed through the clouds, leaving the gray expanse of the eastern seaboard behind for the deep, promising blue of the upper atmosphere. Below, the world was a patchwork quilt of land and sea. Inside the cabin, the only sound was the muted roar of the engines and the gentle hum of the climate control system. It was an environment engineered for serenity, but Evelyn's mind was a maelstrom. The flight attendant, a woman named Claire, approached tentatively. "Dr. Reed, can I get you anything? Champagne? Tea? We have the Darjeeling you prefer." "Just water for now, Claire." "Thank you," Evelyn replied, her voice distracted. Claire nodded and retreated to the galley, her movements professionally silent, but underscored with a palpable tension. The entire crew was walking on eggshells. Liam sat opposite Evelyn, his laptop already open, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He was a wizard of open-source intelligence, able to weave together disparate threads from the digital world into a coherent tapestry. "I'm starting with the basics," he said, not looking up. "FAA records, public statements, any social media footprint. Miller is old school, so I don't expect a huge online presence, but you'd be surprised what people's family members post." Evelyn nodded, leaning her head back against the soft leather. She closed her eyes, trying to force her thoughts away from the tarmac and toward Geneva. The summit was hosted by the World Sustainability Forum. Her keynote address was in 2 days, but the most critical meetings were the informal ones happening before the main event. Dinners, cocktail hours, private chats in hotel lounges. The 45-minute delay meant she would miss the prearranged dinner with Henrik Lundqvist, the Swedish energy minister whose support was crucial. It was a setback, but recoverable. She'd have to work twice as hard to get that FaceTime now. Her biggest competitor would be there, Julian Croft, the notoriously aggressive CEO of Agricorp Global. Agricorp was a behemoth, a corporate relic that championed traditional, chemical-intensive farming. They saw Aura Innovate's sustainable, AI-driven model as an existential threat. Croft was a ruthless operator known for his cutthroat tactics. He would exploit any perceived weakness. Showing up late and flustered was a weakness. An hour into the flight, the co-pilot's voice came over the cabin's intercom, startlingly gentle. "Dr. Reed, this is Alex Vance from the cockpit. I just wanted to sincerely apologize for what happened on the ground. Captain Miller's conduct was unprofessional and completely inexcusable." The direct apology was unexpected. "Thank you, Mr. Vance. I appreciate that," Evelyn said, her voice clear and steady. "If you'll permit me, Dr. Reed, I'd like to stop back for a moment when I'm on my rest cycle. There's something I think you should know." A new thread of intrigue. "I'll be here, Mr. Vance." 2 hours later, as they soared over the Atlantic, Alex Vance appeared in the cabin. He was younger than Evelyn had realized, probably in his early 30s, with an earnest, worried expression. He clutched a paper cup of coffee like a shield. "Dr. Reed," he began, refusing the seat Liam offered and choosing to stand. "Again, I'm truly sorry. I've never seen Frank behave that way. I mean, he's grumpy and has some outdated views. But that was different." "Different how?" Evelyn pressed, leaning forward. "It was the call," Alex said, lowering his voice. "About 30 minutes before you arrived. He took a call on his personal cell. He stepped away from the cockpit to take it, which is unusual. He's usually all business during pre-flight. When he came back, his mood was dark. He was agitated, triple-checking things that didn't need checking. He kept looking at the FBO, waiting for your car. This was the missing piece, the catalyst. Miller's prejudice had been the weapon, but something else had loaded the gun. "Did you hear any of the conversation?" Liam asked. Alex shook his head. "No, but when he hung up, I heard him mutter something under his breath. It sounded like, Whatever it takes, the bonus is worth it. Bonus. The word hung in the air. Pilots for Stratus Jet were on a handsome salary. They didn't get performance bonuses for individual flights. A bonus for what? Delaying a passenger? It made no sense. Unless the bonus wasn't coming from Stratus Jet. Thank you, Alex. This is very helpful, Evelyn said, her mind racing. You've taken a risk by telling me this. It's the right thing to do, Alex said, his jaw tightening. He put my career at risk too, not to mention tarnishing the reputation of our profession. If you file a formal complaint, which you absolutely should, I will provide a full statement corroborating everything. With a final nod, he returned to the cockpit, leaving Evelyn and Liam in a thick, conspiratorial silence. A bonus, Liam whispered, his eyes wide. Someone paid him to delay you. And there's only one person who benefits from me being late to Geneva, Evelyn finished. Julian Croft. The hypothesis was audacious. Could Croft, as ruthless as he was, orchestrate something so petty and yet so direct? Could he have found a pilot with a pre-existing prejudice and a price and weaponized him? It seemed like something out of a corporate thriller, but the world of high-stakes business was often stranger than fiction. Liam, change your search parameters, Evelyn commanded, her lethargy replaced by a sharp, focused energy. Stop looking for dirt on Miller. Start looking for connections. Any connection, no matter how tenuous, between Frank Miller and AgriCorp Global or Julian Croft. Check his family, his friends, his finances. Look for recent large deposits. Look for a weak spot. For the next 4 hours, the only sound was the clicking of Liam's keyboard. The Atlantic slid beneath them, a dark and empty expanse. The flight attendant served a meal they barely touched. Evelyn's mind was a whirlwind of strategy. The game had changed. This was no longer just a case of personal insult. This was corporate sabotage. As the coast of Ireland appeared on the flight map, a pale green smudge in the distance, Liam finally spoke. I've got something, he said, his voice grim. It's not direct. It's a side door. Go on, Evelyn urged. Frank Miller has a brother-in-law, a man named David Chenoweth. He's a mid-level logistics manager at a shipping firm in Baltimore. And 3 weeks ago, Liam said, turning his laptop screen towards her, Chenoweth's firm, Harbor Marine Logistics, signed a major exclusive contract with a new client. They're now handling all of the North American port logistics for AgriCorp Global. Evelyn stared at the screen. It was circumstantial, but it was there. A link, a plausible chain of influence. Croft gives a lucrative contract to a small firm, making the logistics manager, David Chenoweth, a hero. Then a favor's asked. My biggest rival is flying to a crucial summit. Your brother-in-law is her pilot. I need her to be late. Make it happen. And there's a substantial bonus in it for him. It was clever, deniable. The money wouldn't flow from AgriCorp to Miller. It would be buried, perhaps as a signing bonus to Chenoweth's firm, who could then pass it to Miller in cash. Hard to trace, but not impossible. He thought I was just some random rich woman, Evelyn said, a cold fire in her eyes. He and Croft, they both made the same mistake. They saw my face and put me in a box. They assumed I wouldn't have the resources or the resolve to fight back, to look deeper. They assumed I'd just be angry and then forget it. She looked out the window as the sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. They are about to learn, she said softly, to Liam and to herself, just how wrong they were. Geneva was no longer just about securing a partnership. It was about dismantling an enemy. Geneva welcomed them with a cool, damp evening and the twinkle of lights reflecting off the surface of Lake Geneva. As the G650 taxied to its designated spot at the private terminal, Evelyn was already in motion. The fight on the tarmac and the revelations mid-flight had transformed her exhaustion into crystalline focus. The mission had expanded, win the summit and expose Julian Croft. Her phone buzzed the moment they were on the ground. It was a text from Henrik Lundqvist, the Swedish minister. So sorry we missed each other tonight, Evelyn. I had to fly back to Stockholm unexpectedly. My deputy will be at the summit. Let's connect next month. A cold dread washed over her. Croft hadn't just made her late for dinner. He had cost her a crucial face-to-face meeting. Lundqvist was the key influencer in the European consortium. His unexpected departure felt far too convenient. Croft undoubtedly had used the time he'd bought to his advantage, perhaps spooking the minister with misinformation about Aura Innovate's readiness or financial stability. He got to Lundqvist, she said to Liam as they disembarked. The delay wasn't just to fluster me, it was to create a window of opportunity for him. Liam's expression was grim. What's our play? We changed the game, Evelyn replied, her stride purposeful as they walked toward the waiting sedan. Croft wants to fight in the shadows with whispers and sabotage. We're going to drag him into the light. The next 36 hours were a blur of calculated action. Evelyn, operating on sheer adrenaline, became a force of nature. She dispatched Liam to work with her legal team back in the States, instructing them to start a formal but quiet investigation into the financial ties between Agricorp, Harbor Marine Logistics, and by extension, David Chenoweth and Frank Miller. They were to look for any anomalous payments, any hint of a money trail. Meanwhile, Evelyn launched her own counteroffensive at the summit. She worked the conference floor at the Intercontinental Hotel with a grace and intensity that belied the turmoil of the past day. She cornered Lundqvist's deputy, a sharp woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, and instead of lamenting the missed meeting, she presented a condensed, powerful version of her pitch over coffee, showcasing data so compelling it couldn't be ignored. She saw Julian Croft across the atrium. He was exactly as she remembered him, tall, impeccably dressed in a Savile Row suit with a predator's smile that never quite reached his cold gray eyes. He was surrounded by a small group of admirers, laughing at some story. He caught her eye and gave a small, condescending nod, a silent acknowledgement of her late arrival, a victor's salute. Evelyn met his gaze, held it, and gave him nothing back but a calm, unreadable stare. Let him think he'd won the first round. Her moment came during the day one plenary session. The topic was the future of food security. Julian Croft was a panelist. He spoke eloquently, using corporate buzzwords like synergy, optimization, and scaling proven methodologies. He painted Agricorp as the steady, reliable hand that had been feeding the world for 70 years, and cast new era companies like Aura Innovate as risky, unproven gambles. We must be wary of disruptive technologies that promise utopia, but risk fracturing a supply chain that, while imperfect, currently feeds billions, Croft said smoothly. It's a time for steady leadership, not radical experiments. During the Q&A, Evelyn got to a microphone. Dr. Evelyn Reed, Aura Innovate, she began, her voice ringing with clarity through the large hall. Every head turned. Croft's smile faltered for a microsecond. Mr. Croft, you speak of the reliability of proven methodologies. Your proven methodologies include the mass use of neonicotinoid pesticides that are devastating pollinator populations, and monoculture farming that has led to unprecedented topsoil erosion. Your Q3 profits were impressive, but they were buoyed by record sales of herbicides banned in 32 countries. So my question is this: are you a food company, or are you fundamentally a chemical company that happens to sell food as a delivery system? A stunned silence fell over the hall, followed by a wave of whispers. The question was a dagger, sharp and precise. It cut through his corporate jargon and struck at the rotten core of Agricorp's business model. Croft was blindsided. His face flushed a dangerous shade of red. Our products are fully regulated and approved, and I find the insinuation of your question to be unprofessional and, frankly, slanderous. It is not slander if it is a matter of public record, Evelyn countered calmly. The data is clear. My company believes that true innovation is not about finding more efficient ways to poison the earth, but in leveraging technology like AI to work in harmony with it. We believe the greatest risk isn't experimentation. It's continuing down a path that is demonstrably unsustainable. She had seized control of the narrative. The rest of the Q&A was dominated by questions challenging Agricorp. Croft was left stammering, his polished veneer cracked. He left the stage looking furious. That evening, Evelyn received a call from Robert Davies, the CEO of Stratusjet Management. His voice was grave. Dr. Reed, Evelyn, he began, dispensing with formalities. First, let me offer my most profound and unreserved apology. I have no words for what happened. Captain Miller has been suspended, pending a full investigation. His actions were a grotesque violation of every principle we stand for. Thank you, Robert, Evelyn said, her tone professional but cool. But I believe it's more than just a behavioral issue. I have reason to believe your pilot was paid to delay my flight. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Evelyn proceeded to lay out the details: the suspicious phone call, the co-pilot's testimony about a bonus, and the connection she'd uncovered between Miller's brother-in-law and her chief competitor, Agricorp. The silence that followed was long and heavy. Robert Davies was no fool. He understood the monumental legal and reputational liability this represented for his company. Stratus Jet Management didn't just fly jets. They sold trust and discretion to the world's most powerful people. The idea that one of their pilots could be bought, that their service could be weaponized for corporate sabotage, was an existential threat. Dr. Reed, Davies said, his voice now steeped, I am launching a full-scale internal audit with our forensic accounting team and outside counsel. I will get to the bottom of this. You have my word. We will turn over every stone. I expect you will, Evelyn said, because my legal team is doing the same. She hung up the phone. The pieces were moving. The trap was being set. Julian Croft had thrown a rock at her, thinking she was a simple target. He had no idea he'd just disturbed a hornet's nest, and the full swarm was about to turn his way. The battle in Geneva was won, but the war for justice was just heating up. While Evelyn was making waves in Geneva, a different kind of storm was brewing back in the United States. Robert Davies, the CEO of Stratus Jet, was a man galvanized by terror, the terror of a billion-dollar lawsuit and the complete annihilation of his company's reputation. He moved with a speed and ferocity that Captain Frank Miller was utterly unprepared for. The internal investigation at Stratus Jet was not the gentle corporate wrist slap Miller might have expected. It was a forensic dissection of his life. He was grounded, his company credentials revoked, and summoned to the headquarters in White Plains, New York. He walked in with the blustering confidence of a man who believed his 30 years of service would earn him the benefit of the doubt. He walked out a broken man. The investigators, led by a ruthless former federal prosecutor, had already interviewed co-pilot Alex Vance, whose testimony was damning. They had pulled Miller's personal phone records, which showed a 5-minute call from a burner phone just 32 minutes before Evelyn's arrival at Teterboro. Most critically, they had subpoenaed his financial records. What they found was a man living beyond his means. A recent home renovation, a new boat, his son's exorbitant college tuition. It all pointed to a need for cash. Then they found the smoking gun. 6 days before the flight to Geneva, Miller had made a cash deposit of $50,000 into his checking account. Cash deposits of that size are automatically flagged by banks and reported to the Treasury Department. For a salaried pilot, it was an impossible sum to explain. Faced with evidence of conspiracy, undeclared income, and the threat of the FAA revoking his license for life, Frank Miller crumbled. His loyalty to his brother-in-law evaporated in the face of his own ruin. He confessed everything. He told them about the call from David Chenoweth. David had been ecstatic about the new Agricorp contract, calling it a company maker. Then a week later, the strange request came. Julian Croft needed a favor. He needed Dr. Reed's flight delayed. At first, Miller had refused. It was too risky. But David had been insistent. He'd mentioned a finder's fee from Agricorp, a portion of which he was willing to pass on. $50,000 in cash for a 1-hour delay. Just be a pain, Frank, David had said. Question her credentials. Insist on extra security checks. Use the rulebook against her. She's just some tech CEO. She'll probably back down. The narrative David sold him was that it was a low-risk way to cause a minor inconvenience for a corporate rival. The racial animus Miller already harbored simply made him the perfect, willing tool. He didn't just do it for the money. He did it because he felt a sense of satisfaction in putting this woman, who represented a world he didn't understand and resented, in her place. Meanwhile, Evelyn's own legal team was closing in from another angle. Working with forensic accountants, they analyzed the contract between Agricorp and Harbor Marine Logistics. On the surface, it looked like a standard logistics deal, but buried in an appendix was a highly unusual line item, a $250,000 discretionary onboarding and facilitation fee paid to Harbor Marine. The payment was structured to be at the sole discretion of the logistics manager, David Chenoweth. It was, in essence, a corporate slush fund, and it was the source of Miller's bribe. The day after the Geneva summit concluded, a resounding success for Aura Innovate, with Dr. Anya Sharma now championing their proposal within the consortium. Evelyn sat in a conference call with her legal team and Robert Davies. "We have Miller's full confession," Davies said, his voice heavy with fatigue and disgust. "He has implicated his brother-in-law, David Chenoweth, and by extension, Agricorp. We have terminated Captain Miller's employment, effective immediately, and have reported his conduct to the FAA and the Department of Justice." Evelyn's lead counsel, a sharp-witted woman named Jessica Riley, spoke next. "And we have the money trail on our end. The facilitation fee is the linchpin. It's a clear violation of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and constitutes commercial bribery. Julian Croft's fingerprints are all over this." The path forward was clear. This was no longer just a civil matter. This was criminal. Armed with Miller's confession and the financial evidence, Evelyn's team filed a comprehensive lawsuit against Agricorp and Julian Croft personally, alleging tortious interference, commercial bribery, and industrial espionage. Simultaneously, Stratus Jet Management, in a move to save itself, filed its own suit against Agricorp for damages to its business reputation. They also provided their entire internal investigation file to the U.S. Attorney's Office. The news broke like a thunderclap in the business world. It wasn't a quiet story buried in the trade papers. It was a front-page headline in the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times. Agricorp CEO Julian Croft accused of bribery and sabotage scheme against rival Aura Innovate. The story was explosive. It had everything: a brilliant, trailblazing black female CEO, a prestigious private jet company, a villainous corporate titan, and a sordid tale of prejudice and greed. The narrative was overwhelmingly in Evelyn's favor. She was portrayed as the poised, powerful victim of a clumsy, discriminatory plot. Croft was cast as the cartoonish villain, a relic from a bygone era of corporate malfeasance. Agricorp's board of directors, a collection of old money industrialists who valued stability above all else, was thrown into a panic. Their stock price plummeted 15% in a single day of trading. Their phones rang off the hook with calls from furious institutional investors. The scandal threatened to undo decades of brand building. Julian Croft's carefully constructed world was collapsing around him. He issued a vehement denial, of course, blaming the entire affair on a rogue employee and a misunderstanding. He threw David Chenoweth under the bus immediately, claiming the logistics manager had acted alone in some misguided attempt to curry favor. But it was too late. The evidence was too strong, the confession from Miller too detailed. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, known for her aggressive pursuit of white-collar crime, announced a formal investigation. Federal agents raided Agricorp's headquarters, carrying out boxes of documents and computer hard drives. The whole sordid conspiracy, born from a toxic mix of arrogance, greed, and prejudice, was now unraveling in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. Julian Croft, the untouchable titan of industry, was finally cornered. Karma, when it finally arrives, is rarely a gentle corrective. For Frank Miller, Julian Croft, and the others caught in the web of their own making, it was a relentless, crushing force. For Captain Frank Miller, the fall was swift and absolute. Fired for cause by Stratus Jet, he found himself a pariah in the industry he had dedicated his life to. His confession, made in a desperate attempt to gain leniency, was now public record as part of the legal filings. The FAA, citing conduct unbecoming of a licensed airman and a demonstrated lack of moral character, permanently revoked his airline transport pilot license. At 58 years old, he was legally barred from ever captaining an aircraft again. The elite world of corporate aviation is small and built on trust. No charter company would hire him as a consultant, no flight school as an instructor. The $50,000 bribe, which had seemed like a lifeline, was now an anchor dragging him to the bottom. After legal fees, he was left with nothing. He had to sell the newly renovated house and the boat that the money had helped pay for. The respect he had commanded, the crisp uniform he had worn with such pride, were all gone. He was reduced to a cautionary tale whispered among pilots. the man who let his prejudice and greed cost him everything. He ended up taking a job managing the parts inventory at a small regional airport in Delaware, spending his days in a dusty hangar instead of a gleaming cockpit, the whine of distant jets a constant, bitter reminder of the life he had thrown away. For Julian Croft, the karma was more complex but far more devastating. His attempts to deflect blame were futile. David Chenoweth, facing federal charges, quickly flipped, agreeing to testify against Croft in exchange for a plea bargain. He detailed the meetings, the phone calls, the pressure Croft had applied. He explained how Croft had identified Miller as a potential tool, having heard from an acquaintance that Miller was an old-school guy with a chip on his shoulder. The AgriCorp board, facing shareholder revolt in a catastrophic brand crisis, had no choice. Julian Croft was forced into a resignation, effective immediately. He was stripped of his golden parachute, his stock options clawed back due to the malfeasance clauses in his contract. The empire he had ruthlessly built and lorded over had cast him out, but his humiliation was far from over. The Department of Justice indicted him on multiple counts, including conspiracy to commit commercial bribery. The trial was a media circus. Evelyn Reed was called as the star witness. She took the stand, not with anger, but with the same unshakable professional calm she had displayed on the tarmac. She simply recounted the facts. Her testimony was powerful, credible, and devastating. Julian Croft was found guilty. He was sentenced to 3 years in a minimum security federal prison and fined $10 million. The image of the once powerful CEO in a drab prison jumpsuit became the final, ignominious chapter of his career. His name, once synonymous with corporate power, was now synonymous with corporate crime. For the others, the consequences rippled outward. David Chenoweth received 2 years of probation for his cooperation, but lost his career in logistics. Marcus Thorne, the FBO manager who had initially deferred to Miller's authority, was demoted and reassigned to a remote regional airport. While not complicit, his failure to intervene was deemed a critical lapse in judgment. The incident led to a complete overhaul of FBO protocols nationwide, with mandatory training on identifying and de-escalating discriminatory behavior. The captain's authority was no longer seen as an unquestionable absolute when it came to passenger rights. AgriCorp itself paid a heavy price. They settled the lawsuits with both Evelyn Reed's R-Innovate and Stratus Jet for an undisclosed sum rumored to be in the 9 figures. The financial blow was massive, but the reputational damage was worse. To survive, the board was forced to clean house, bringing in a new CEO with a mandate for transparency and ethical reform. They were forced to adopt many of the sustainable practices they had once mocked, just to regain market trust. In a twist of supreme irony, the company Julian Croft had tried to sabotage was now forced to emulate it to save itself. Evelyn watched it all unfold, not with glee, but with a sense of solemn vindication. Her fight had never been about revenge. It was about accountability. It was about proving that no one, not a pilot on a tarmac, not a CEO in a boardroom, was above the consequences of their actions. The hard karma that had fallen upon them all wasn't her doing. It was the natural, inevitable outcome of their own choices, of the arrogance and prejudice they had let fester in their hearts. 1 year later, Evelyn Reed once again stood on the tarmac at Teterboro Airport. It was another crisp autumn day, but the atmosphere was entirely different. The air no longer felt charged with conflict. It felt full of potential. Her G150 and a 912 AR waited for her, a familiar and reassuring presence. Her company, Aura Innovate, was thriving. The fallout from the AgriCorp scandal had inadvertently acted as a global marketing campaign. Corporations and governments, eager to distance themselves from AgriCorp's tainted brand, had flocked to Aura Innovate. The European consortium deal, finally signed, was even larger than she had hoped. Her technology was now being deployed across 3 continents, changing the face of modern agriculture. As she approached the air stairs, a new flight crew greeted her. The captain stepped forward to meet her. She was a woman in her late 40s, with a warm, confident smile and sharp, intelligent eyes. Her name tag read, Captain Annabelle Foster. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Reed," Captain Foster said, her handshake firm. We're honored to be your new designated crew. We've read your file. The coffee is brewed and the flight plan into the Aspen conference is filed. Wheels up whenever you're ready." There was no questioning, no suspicion, just respect. It was a small thing, but it meant the world. The culture at StratusJet had undergone a seismic shift, driven by the hard lessons of the Miller incident. Evelyn smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile. "Thank you, Captain. It's a pleasure to meet you." Boarding the jet, she felt a sense of peace. The cabin was the same, but she was different. The events of the past year had solidified something within her. She had faced down overt prejudice and covert conspiracy and had emerged not just victorious, but stronger. But her victory was not just for herself. With a portion of the settlement money from AgriCorp, she had launched a new philanthropic venture, the Horizon Initiative. The foundation had a dual mission: to provide scholarships for women and people of color in STEM and aviation, and to fund legal aid for those fighting workplace discrimination. It was her way of ensuring that the ladder she had climbed was extended for others to follow, and that those who tried to kick it away would be held accountable. As the Gulf Stream soared into the sky, Evelyn looked down at the sprawling landscape below. She thought of Frank Miller in his dusty hangar, and Julian Croft in his sterile prison cell. Their stories were cautionary tales of power misused and humanity lost. They had tried to block her path, to put her in a box defined by their own small-mindedness, but they had failed to understand a fundamental truth. True power wasn't about the title on your door or the jet you owned. It was about the strength of your convictions, the integrity of your actions, and the vision you held for a better world. From 40,000 feet, looking out at the endless blue horizon, Evelyn Reed saw nothing but open sky. She had faced the storm and had not just weathered it, but had learned to command the winds. Her journey was far from over. In fact, it was just getting started. Dr. Evelyn Reed's story is a powerful reminder that the ugliest prejudices can be found even in the most luxurious of settings. It wasn't just about a pilot blocking a passenger. It was about a system of bias that empowered him to do so. But what happens when that bias collides with unshakable resilience and integrity? You get more than just a victory, you get a revolution. Evelyn didn't just win her flight. She exposed a criminal conspiracy, transformed an entire corporate culture, and used her platform to create real, lasting change for others. Her story proves that the greatest response to being underestimated is to exceed every possible expectation. If this story of justice, karma, and the triumph of character moved you and you want to hear more true life dramas like it, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. What did you think of the karma Julian Croft received? Was it enough? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening.